All right, welcome in, Steelers fans, to the Noll Road. A reported rejection of a trade proposal, a 2 in Freiermuth for McLaurin. Steelers reportedly said no. Did they make the right move? Let's talk about it. Here we go.
Van to the corner of the end zone. Oh, for a touchdown!
All right, and welcome in. I'm Gavin Dawson, 25-year sports radio veteran, along with my man, the all-academic SEC lineman at Kentucky, Newbear Lesniewski. How the heck are you, buddy?
I want to raise, denied, and add apparently laughed. Like some of the stuff going in the Twitter stream was that they didn't just say no, they laughed that offer off.
Okay, I think Omar Khan is doing the right thing for now, but if push comes to shove, you start the season and the offense is clearly missing a wide receiver 2 target, I'd be willing to do this trade. I think some Steelers fans are saying, why haven't you said yes yet? There's other options out there. Tyreek Hill is unresolved. Who knows what teams could really come out of the gates and struggle, and you could get a wide receiver 2 for less. So I do want to acknowledge the Commanders are asking you to overpay. I'm saying no for now, but privately I'm saying, dude, we might have to end up doing this. It would be a shame to have all this come together and have our offense not work because we don't have a second guy that can double DK Metcalf.
Yeah, and you know what's fascinating about this is you can't say DK Metcalf without also saying we traded a 2 to get dude. And everyone's been so focused on Terry McLaurin's age. That's in the coming years of a presumed extension where you talk about him getting into his 30s and what that means opposite DK or versus mode against really, really good receivers all time. But when they swapped a 2 for DK, they didn't send any other dudes. They wrote a check. What you're talking about now is all 3 of those things. Another excellent, potentially excellent, really good player. Another good player. Muth's good. A 2, and you're writing that check.
Yeah, and you can't actually do that as your first option. You're like, okay, that's too much, right? That is the Commander's ask, and you fire back with no, we're offering a 4, and then maybe you end up settling for a 3 and maybe another player. But I think a 3 is fair trade value for Terry McLaurin. We've looked at this, we've compared it. I mean, the age, the contract that you have to give him. You know, if it's 25-year-old Terry McLaurin, yeah, maybe we're talking about a 1 and a 2. But there's just, to me, this is the Commander saying, sure, we'll trade him if we can rip you off.
Right. And when you go back through it, look, everyone loves hearing the Muth call. That's a thing. Whatever the tight end's name is, we're going to figure out a way to chant it together in that stadium. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about is we're talking about a 10 yards a catch guy. We're talking about 18 touchdowns in 4 years. We're talking about a good player with the potential to be really good in this system. And everyone gets so hung up on the 12, the 13, the 14. What did you call it yesterday? The 04. And, you go back over time and you look at Jonnu Smith when he was young, and his career high yards per reception is 12.9. His career average is 10.8. So, like, when you start talking about what you're giving up, like, what are you really giving up? Is it a control thing? Is it because you just love the player? You have his jersey? And what are you getting back? And when you talk about the ceiling of a team with a guy like McLaurin opposite DK Metcalf, that is a better picture than a tight end room with Pat Freiermuth.
Yeah. I think in the world of player acquisition, unless you draft the guy, you're usually looking at overpaying some way. Maybe this is too much for a front office to really take seriously, so they have to laugh it off because it's such an insane offer. But on the other side of that, Newbear, is what do you do? What are you willing to overpay on when it's a championship opportunity?
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things about today's NFL is that the Super Bowl is there for the taking. All you have to do is say, we're willing to sacrifice enough resources from the future. The Eagles have just put on a masterclass of that. And last year, their team was so much better that after they made a few adjustments early on in the season, they strutted all the way to the Super Bowl, smacking everybody in the face. Nobody was even close. They were in a different league, even compared to the Chiefs, who have the AFC in a sleeper hold, a completely different league. So what do you do to get there? Sure, the Eagles have drafted good. They have made smart decisions in free agency and made some good trades. But really what they did is they said, we're going to add way more good players than anybody else. And we're not going to put that credit card away until we're done. And look at this. We won a Super Bowl. Now the Eagles are significantly worse. They actually, after they win the Super Bowl, they let 4 or 5 guys go off the rotation, the Steelers being a benefactor of one of those players, Darius Slay. They still might be better than everybody, Newbear. Why? Because nobody else is saying, boy, that Jeffrey Lurie's got a great idea. Let me just free up a bunch of capital and then do signing bonuses. We'll push the cap hits into the future, and then we'll dominate the flipping league. The Steelers are so close right now. You cannot let a second-round pick and Freiermuth stop you from creating that in the same state, just in a different conference.
So the other thing that Philly does is they just wait for the next best available Alabama or Georgia player to pop up on the board, and they take that guy. There's not a whole lot of thinking that has to
great
go into
strategy.
That. But to what you were just saying, and versus what you said at the top, what's really interesting is what happens if Tua takes one more shot? What happens if the Dolphins fall off a cliff and it turns into a fire sale and you can get Cheetah for pennies on the dollar, right? Peanuts at the circus. Like, there's a chance that's a real thing. And that is why you would play the waiting game. To your point about hitting the gas is what happens if you don't wait? What happens if you don't say, we're going to spend the whole season figuring out if Roman Wilson can be wide receiver 2 when Terry McLaurin is? He's arguably 1. It's arguably him and DK as, competition, not for targets, but for who's going to help you win that game and get the job done. So as you go through this, what do we always talk about? The Steelers are the only team that might be threading the needle about competing now while planning for next. Are you seriously going to tell me that whoever the quarterback is next year, whether it's a cameo from Aaron Rodgers and not on social media on the actual football field, or insert whoever you go get in free agency or whoever you draft, or trying to make Will Howard Ben Roethlisberger 2.0, are you telling me that whoever quarterback 1 is, both next year and going forward, doesn't stand a better chance of success with DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, whoever the guy is throwing them the ball?
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think after you go for it, maybe if you look at next year and say, wow, maybe it's not long-term sustainable to have DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin on the same roster, on the same payroll, you can trade one of them. That's another thing that the championship teams are doing. How many different teams has Jalen Ramsey been on with the idea that he's coming here to push us over the top? So Omar Khan and this front office, this ownership group, have demonstrated we're breaking away from trying to manage the salary cap the same every year. And there's some years where we're going to go for it and really push. And what I'm hoping for is on the other side of that is, okay, we went for it. Maybe we won. We're going to trade away some of these players. We're going to let a free agent go and put ourselves in an ideal position to draft the next quarterback or to draft the next generational left tackle if Broderick Jones doesn't continue on this trajectory. There's so many benefits to riding the roller coaster of cap management. Your best years are going to be better, and your down years, you're going to cleanse your salary cap and get a top 5, top 10 pick. This is the way.
Shout out Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Hard to not talk about Ramsey and not immediately point at the Rams and what that for. You always talk about the bleep you picks. How about the fact that Devonte Adams is on his 4th team in 3 years? And when people talk about wide receiver age, he's 33 this year. So when you start talking about what might mitigate those circumstances and worrying about Terry McLaurin getting old fast, if the production is still there, there will be value. And oh, by the way, if you move Freiermuth, guess what? There's one less mouth to feed in the tight end room. So like all these things are interrelated as you think about 2025, how you go chase that ring, and 2026 and beyond, and how you continue to want to do the damn thing.
Yeah. It feels like this story is still alive, though, and it's crazy. It's been on life support twice. I might have called it a couple of times. You know, we lost it on the operating room, but now it's back. And I think what's happening, you know, weird stuff coming out with these insider reports is so often sources are doing PR with you and sources are negotiating, right? We never want to make ourselves look weak, and we never want to send the message through the media that offer that dude sent is anywhere near what we'd actually take. Because if you don't say from a Pittsburgh perspective, deal's done, you know, then maybe Washington thinks, dude, they're about to give us Freiermuth in a 2. What you want to send across is that offer's got to change a lot in order for us to believe that there is a realistic chance. So maybe this story will appear on live support before, bam, it's fully done. But I do expect the Commanders to get McLaurin, to get a contract agreed to. They just have way too much momentum, and they're really just predicated on their passing game being great. There's not a lot of other good stuff going on with Washington.
The other thing that's going on out there in the wild is what you see in the ripple effect from the John Mechie move and what the Eagles, again, have done. You talk about playing this ain't checkers, this is chess, right? And when the Mechie move, ripple effect, fly effect, as you always talk about, is you're now seeing reports that the Steelers not only had Gabe Davis come in on a plane, and let's check out that knee one more time, but they're scouting Jalen Polk. Or they're looking at other guys who were high picks who haven't figured it out, or who have, you know, all the traits that these guys like from the middle rounds that are getting buried on a roster or are potential cut candidates. And there's a million names flying around. The benefit to that, right, is that you're putting pressure on everyone without having to say no or let it be leaked that you laughed in their face. But at the same time, letting you know that, hey, there's a way that we think we can get this done, balling on a budget. You better come correct when you come back to the table.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Okay, final branch on this topic tree that I got is just, isn't what happened to that story? And it was a good report that McLaurin wanted to be a number 1 wherever he goes. And, you know, it's just like, what are we really doing here? What's real? You know, was that real? Or is the Steelers laughing at this trade proposal real? You know, I don't know. It's hard, but, you know, I think what it comes down to is, do the Steelers want to do what the Commanders want, but are the Steelers willing to give McLaurin what he wants?
I think part of that is damage control on the player's part, because all he's hearing is, look how old this dude is. Wrong side of 30. This is what his cap number is going to be as you go 31, 32, 33, 34. How are we going to give this guy $100 million guaranteed? And he's getting out there saying, not only am I wide receiver 1, but I'm basically going to be wide receiver 1 wherever I go. So don't you trade for me and then have the intention of signing for me if you're not going to be the one who writes the check, because I might not even be a rental.
Yeah. How good is he, you think? Between him and DK Metcalf, is there a clear and better? Is there a number 1?
I mean, they're different dudes. The thing about McLaurin is that he's the definition of a professional wide receiver. And so what do you mean by that? He affects the game at all 3 levels, right? He's going to get you short, medium, and long. He can run every route in the tree. He can play in any scheme. He's not as big or as body type as DK Metcalf, but I mean, DK Metcalf, short of looking small next to Megatron, is one of those one-of-one type of guys. You know, but when you look at Terry McLaurin giving you consistency, check. When you look at him giving you the potential for explosive plays, also check. When you look at him being a cerebral guy who's played multiple systems, who's put up numbers with laundry list of quarterbacks that you even have to go deep into rabbit holes and be, oh shit, that guy played for the Commanders too, right? And then, oh, by the way, he gets Jaden Daniels, and they start making things look like cheat codes on easy mode. And you start seeing these reports where McLaurin's literally going to the sideline saying, hey, run this play. I'm going to turn this guy into burnt toast. And all Jaden Daniels has to do is butter the bread, 13 touchdowns. Now, you can say that's an outlier based on the average of the seasons before that. I think that the outlier is, Jaden Daniels is special, and everyone else who was throwing him the ball for the bulk of his career probably shouldn't have been starting in the National Football League.
I think what you're saying there that really strikes me is how well they complement each other, and I do wonder if Aaron Rodgers' ability to make wide receivers better if they're just on schedule and running the right routes. If the Steelers are looking at this like, do we really need a true number 2, or is one guy that dictates coverage along with a group of professional but maybe not outstanding wide receivers? I'd be wanting to push it over the top, but I mean, the Packers never really had to. I mean, they drafted Devonte Adams, they drafted Jordy Nelson, but they had one guy and then professional wide receivers, as you said. I just don't know if you need like AP2 type of talent in order to really make this passing game work, as long as you can run the ball and play defense.
The thing about McLaurin, especially opposite a guy like DK, that helps though, is that for the last few years we've had George Pickens going 0-1-9, and he had a very specific role. And then you looked at a guy like Deontay Johnson, and he was more of the underneath, more of the route runner, more of the technician guy. And you go, okay, well, those guys complement each other too. The thing that gets really cool when you have two guys who are similar athletic profiles, again, Metcalf a little bit more off the charts, Metcalf bigger body, Metcalf being a guy that you expect some things, maybe he can do some things that Terry can't do, and that Terry could then do from a technique and technician perspective. When you have two guys who are more similar, they're less predictable. And that's true even if they're not that fast. That's why you signed Devonte Adams, even though you have Puka Nacua. Neither one of them is a burner, but just because one of them is at X and one of them is at Z, or one of them is in motion and one of them is static, they can play off of each other because they can do everything on the route tree. You can make it work with scheme. You can make it work with concepts. And oh, by the way, you can make it work with Matthew Stafford's arm. We're now having that conversation about Aaron Rodgers and how he can take things to the next level. So what ingredients are you putting in the meal for him to cook with?
Yeah, I think I was just thinking about it. I was able to bring up the stats. MVP year, 48-5 from Aaron Rodgers. Just an incredible season he had there. This is 2020. You had Aaron Jones go for 1,100 yards and Jamal Williams for 500. These Steelers running backs can give you that. Now, Jones was at 5.5 an attempt, so it was highly efficient.
Jones is one of the most underrated running backs of his generation. He is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. When healthy. But then you look at the wide receivers, and this is what I was talking about. Now, Devonte Adams better than DK Metcalf. This was Devonte Adams at the absolute height of his powers. He must have been 28 years old. Just get it anywhere near him, he was going to bring it down and make people look stupid. But after that, Valdez Scantling at 690, Robert Tonyan at tight end 586, Alan Lazard 451, and Equinemius St. Brown at 117. Those were your next four most productive ball catchers. Rodgers has this, and sure, the injury is there, but there's definitely enough athleticism left in the tank. All right. Anything else to say before we move on down this road?
So we agree. I just wanted to ask you on the way out, we agree that a 2 and Muth today is too much for Terry McLaurin, because you also have to write the check, right?
Yeah.
So are we talking?
But I'm willing to do it.
If Muth, you're willing to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
So if Muth is part of the deal, if you're Omar Khan, are you saying it's the highest we're willing to go is a 3, or are you at a 4 Muth and the contract? Pause. If it's Muth and a 2, you have to assume it's the contract. But what if you're looking at this as a 1-year rental? So 2 questions. Muth plus what if you're going to write the check? Muth plus what if you're not?
If I'm not going to write the check, this is a rental player. The premise of me willing to do 2 and Muth for him and keeping him long term was just that it's for this year, and I think Muth is a way overpay, but I'm willing to do it because this is a unique opportunity to try to win the Super Bowl. So I don't, I guess I can find more on the trade market with 2 and Muth than a rental of Terry McLaurin, but what I really think is fair compensation is a 3. So we're going to be able to get a this is Washington saying, again, we're only willing to trade him for a ripoff. So if you're willing to take that much capital, take it elsewhere in the trade market, and probably get them to throw you back draft pick compensation. Like it is a very significant overpay. I just think the demand of what's real right now, it's like, hey, here's a Pirates analogy for you, or just a baseball team in general analogy. We're close. We feel like we have the best offense in baseball. We have a good starting rotation, but we don't have a closer. We can win the World Series if we get a closer. We can't if we don't. What's that World Series worth to you? What's that chance at a World Series worth to you? After not getting to the promised land for, 17 years? What are you willing to do to go chase a Super Bowl? And what is the real value of that? Because that's what you're trading for, is an actual chance at crushing the NFL. And I think your entire draft is worth that if you look at it from that perspective.
So the reason I was trying to give you an out was because I was trying to see almost how low you would go, like turn it into limbo for a second, live limbo, let's go on McLaurin. But what's really interesting about this is you keep bringing up how next year, if it doesn't work, you can do whatever you need to do to keep it moving, right?
Yeah.
And one of the breaking news out of Washington is that Brian Robinson Jr. is done and is out after a hard talk with Dan Quinn. So where this thing gets really interesting for me is not that you need Brian Robinson Jr. on this team, but if Washington is coming out randomly out of left field and demanding Muth and a 2, because before it was just draft compensation, and now you're saying we're the oldest team in the league, and Pat Freiermuth in his age 27 season, he helps us now and next. Do you think some of these rumblings out of Washington that they're leaking are to try to say, what other players might we package in this thing to try to clear cap space, to try to clear up their depth chart, where this is just the beginning of the salsa, paging Victor Cruz preseason? Because like you said, the McLaurin trade's been dead. We actually have a thumbnail up, Terry McLaurin trade dead. We thought it was gone. And now not only are they demanding players, but they're putting their own players on the block.
So Can you just tell me where you think Brian Robinson would fit in this room? Because Washington fans frustrated with him. I think fantasy drafters frustrated with him. He didn't get a lot of attempts last year. His yards per attempt were actually a little bit higher from when he was younger, but fans felt like he was slowing down. I couldn't find any data to actually say he's slowing down. I mean, I just think he's a big, strong running back that doesn't have the best agility or top-end speed. So people say he's slow, but, I would look at him as a possible replacement or a workhorse guy if a team needs a runner. I think you could do a lot worse than Brian Robinson, but I don't know where you'd pull his carries from on this team.
Right. But what I am saying is that the rise of Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and you want to talk about fantasy and how much drafts have changed since preseason has started, has made Brian Robinson expendable. Because don't forget Austin Eckler, ageless wonder, assuming that he's healthy finally or once and again, is that where there's smoke, there's fire. And the same way that we were talking about Pittsburgh maybe leaking stuff about guys like Jalen Polk and maybe how we might flip a 6 or a 7 and solve our problem for pennies on the dollar, Washington's now playing the same game, saying our RB1 could be on the open market. Come get Scary Terry with this guy. Insert team who needs help everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see what Washington is going to do. Okay, here we go. We'll be back soon as week 1 approaches. You can find our written words, our socials, and our latest videos every day at thenollroad.com. For a Newbear, I'm Dawson. Till next time, we'll see you on the Noll Road.